Hello, welcome to this live stream. My name is Frank Lavinia on Twitter. I recently changed my handle from Tablet Tier. Oh, my hat's crooked. Let me start that over. All right, that's better. So as you can see today, I'm in the studio, as it were. I should probably turn down that light. There we go. Ooh, that's even worse. All right. Well, clearly I need to do more prep work on on the lighting. It's last time I streamed from here, there was kind of some sunlight coming in, so it gave a nice warmth to the light. Let's see if I can fix that. How about that? Is that better, or is that actually worse? I think it's actually worse. All right, this is why I stopped doing green screen stuff, because I had significant problems trying to get the lighting. I really need to study up on that. Today's stream was kind of just some thoughts for the new year. It's tomorrow's the first work day of the new year, and a lot of folks have undoubtedly have made New Year's resolutions, not just around their health, but also their career. So here's an interesting thing that kind of I could share this lesson and maybe save you some anxiety and some stress. And it's weird because the universe works in some weird ways. Don't worry, I'm not going to go woo-woo on you. But what's interesting was how timely this was. I was thinking about the story the other day. But let me put up the tweet where maybe that would help get kind of the action going. You don't need to see me. You don't need to see my bio. Let's hide that. Basically, this was the tweet. Whoops. This was the tweet that got my attention from Donna Sarkar. Donna Sarkar is a legend, and she's known for doing a lot of things. She at one point was Chief Ninja Cat. I think that was her official title, which meant she handled the Windows Insider program. In the last couple of years, she's been doing a lot of stuff with Power Platform. She also, if you don't know, runs a fashion business on the side, which is pretty interesting. It's not something you typically think of in the tech industry, although all industries are kind of software and tech industries, aren't they? But what's interesting is she talked about this. More to this point, they own your IP for anything you create, even if it's on your own time and resources. I actually had a story about this that happened to me personally. Once upon a time, I worked for this consulting company. I had spent 4 years at another consulting company that all they wanted to do was SharePoint. I didn't want to do SharePoint. No knock on SharePoint. Wasn't my thing. I immediately took another job because I knew I really needed to get out of town quickly. And so what I ended up doing was not making a critical mistake. And the mistake was not reading the employment agreement. So put this in perspective. Let me tell you a story. So this was, in a lot of ways, the consulting company wasn't the problem. The first customer I had with them was the absolute problem. It was the most toxic work environment I have ever been in. And I've been in some interesting places. I mean, this was just miserable. Part of it was the politics at the actual customer. So the politics at the customer was this one guy was hired as VP of product development. And he basically had everything lined out. He was going to hire all his buddies from the company he used to work for. They're going to build an entire solution in Java. He basically had it all mapped, everything but the paperwork was signed. The CEO, a new CEO comes in, brings in a CIO. The CIO basically puts the brakes on everything and brings in this company, won't name them. We ended up wanting to do the whole thing in .NET. He wanted to do it all in .NET and Microsoft Stack. So rather than either quit or get with the program, this guy basically sabotaged the project at every turn. So it was a very toxic environment, kind of just before I even set foot in the door. And so there was that. So and it was so toxic. And I mentioned it, and I want to do something else, and they're kind of like, well, you know. And at the time, I had a newborn. I didn't really think it was a good time to be aggressive. And this was not too long after the financial collapse. So the job market wasn't that great. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't that great. Long story short, after about 6 months on the project from hell, I roll off the project. And I'm in the company's offices in Arlington, and they just got these offices, and it was nice. Everything was brand new. And I was working on a proposal for this other customer, doing work I actually wanted to do in a technology platform I actually wanted to be in. It was Silverlight, by the way. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe this job will work out. Pretty good plan here. Maybe it'll be fun. Fast forward a couple hours. I don't know if you've ever been in those terrible work environments, but like every day is just torture. You don't just have Sunday night blues where it turns to Sunday and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to go in. It would be Friday blues. I would literally go home on a Friday and think, oh my God, I have to do this all over again on Monday. It was bad. So things had finally turned a corner on this gig. And I get a phone call from someone who I thought was a good friend. And he says, hey, I heard you're doing courses for Pluralsight. And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, I was just approved. I haven't done anything yet. So Pluralsight is an awesome online training site. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I'm a big fan. I think I'm at 88 days in a row of watching training on there. Awesome site, awesome content. And they always have been. So getting into their program, their author program, it was kind of a big deal. It was a very strenuous interview. One of the most strenuous interviews I'd ever been in, believe it or not. Like more strenuous than not as strenuous as Microsoft, but it's up there. I don't know what their standards are now. This is like 10 years ago. So I was walking on air. I was finally off the toxic project. My book had been done. It was selling well. This was so far my one and only book, Silverlight 4 Business Applications. I was starting to work on a Silverlight kind of project for this HR system. It was beautiful. We were doing microservices. It was, things had finally, looked up. There was the dark storm clouds had kind of lifted. And this call comes and he goes, yeah. So have you written any courses yet? And I'm like, no, I haven't done anything yet because just haven't had a chance. And well, he rather abruptly says, well, any money you make from that belongs to the company. And I start laughing. I'm like, the hell it does. So he pushed back and said, well, it's in your contract. You should have looked at it. My bad. I didn't do the due diligence I should have done. I was so desperate to get out of another toxic situation. Again, 10 years younger, 10 years less wise. I like to think myself now as 10 years older, 10 years wiser. And basically it was the agreement was pretty much like this, that they owned everything. I don't think she's talking about the same company. I seriously doubt it. If you look at my profile, I kind of expound upon this a bit. Oh, that's very meta. It's funny. As I was doing this, I was wondering, am I streaming on Twitter? And here I am. So let's see. So I basically kind of chimed in here and I said, smaller companies have tried this crap too. I don't know what tech company she's talking about. She's not named them, despite efforts from some folks to actually do that. Basically this was kind of the story. So the other thing was, right, I mentioned I had a Silverlight book that was doing pretty well. It was at the time it was the first Silverlight 4 book to hit the market. And so what ended up happening was it sold pretty well. And I was very happy about that. And I was getting royalties come in, and wasn't enough to buy a new car, but it was nice to kind of see that hard work rewarded. you don't write a technology book for the money. Just putting that out there. You're never going to end up on Oprah's book club. You're never going to make a massive return on the money directly. I say that directly, but because writing a book makes you an established figure or an authority figure in a given field, that it does do, that you can monetize. In fact, this job and a lot of consulting work we had while I was at that company was because, oh, you wrote the book on Silverlight. You wrote a book on Silverlight. Like, oh, yeah, we totally want you. So that there's definitely good reasons to write a technical book. Money is not going to be, at least obviously monetizable money, isn't going to be one of them. In fact, if you kind of take all the hours you put into writing a book and editing a book and doing all the work around it, divide that by the, you take the amount you make, divide it by the hours, it's actually works out. There's better ways to make money, put that way. So ultimately, they had actually had the audacity to demand the book typo. So I wrote this book basically the year prior to joining the company. It was published a month prior to me joining the company. They actually demanded the royalties that I made from the book, not back royalties, but any royalties that come in while I was under their employ. They wanted that money. I started laughing. I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. And if there's a second edition, they wanted royalties on that. And they wanted all the royalties, and they let me have a share of that. They promised me that. But ultimately, they did relent. They agreed to let me have royalties on the book I already written. This was their big concession. And we went back and forth. Yeah, he knows a thing or two about this sort of situation. But ultimately, this dragged on. I'm not showing my screen. There we go. So ultimately, their big concession was to let me have the royalties on the book I had already written while I was working there, right? Which I thought was just offensive. That actually made me madder. And so what ended up going on was I was really concerned about was ad revenue from franksworld.com, which, 10 years ago, the ad space on the web was much better. It was much more lucrative. I was actually still in the Google program. I'm not in there now. Not really sure why. They claim that my site is an aggregator, which, like, duh. And apparently it makes me ineligible. So that's a story for another day. But ultimately, at the time, I was making decent money. Like, not a lot, but I had at least 3 income streams at the time. And it was the first time in my life I ever did that. I had a new baby, so I was like, gotta, think long term. And so I had the book, I had ad revenue royalties from Frank's World. And Frank's World, I don't know if you've been there, but franksworld.com, that site had been around since 1995. This company I worked for was formed maybe 2001, 2002. So I knew that they were going to go for that. And that was actually considerably more profitable than writing the book. So I basically went back and forth, and they were going on, anything you do, like, belongs. I'm like, even things that predate the company, like, we're going to start, doing that. And so needless to say, I was mad. And I will give the partners credit for that. I mostly interact with one partner on this. I will give him credit. He didn't just say it's this way or the highway. He was willing to negotiate. However, his form of negotiation was not necessarily my same definition. His method of negotiating was to try to prove to me that his way was the right way. And that letting me have royalties I already collected, keep those royalties that were already in my bank account, probably spent at that point. That was his way of negotiating. And I was just incensed. Like, honestly, like, it really wasn't about the money. It really wasn't about the money. The amount of money we're talking about, and it was asinine, if I can say that on LinkedIn, for him to push that narrative, because the amount of money you make in a book, which is about at least 8 to 10 months worth of effort, would probably be more cost effective. The company would probably make it the bill rate they had me out in about 2 to 3 weeks. It would just be done. So 2 to 3 weeks, 10 months of work. You know, if you frame it that way, it was just a ridiculous amount of money. So it really was about the principle. So we went back and forth, and ultimately it was, we own you. Ultimately, the attitude was just that, and that's what kind of like resonated me. Like, trying to find it, the tweet, but ultimately that's what resonated with me. And ultimately, I don't know what they thought they were doing, but here was the net result. One, I backed out of the Pluralsight course, right? I was like, I looked at the legal agreement. I looked at it. I really couldn't get out of it. I mean, I just couldn't get out of it. So I was like, well, lesson learned, always look over employment agreements, even if you need a job, so you know what you're getting into. I backed out of the Pluralsight course, called them and said, hey, I can't do it. Employer wants all the royalties and revenue from it. I want to do it, but I don't want them. I don't want them to basically steal what I think is rightfully mine. So the guy who interviewed me grilled me hard on some really obscure WPF and XAML type stuff. He's like, no, I totally understand. Called my publisher, who were hot on, since the title did so well, they were hot to get a second edition out ASAP. We basically wrote the book on beta software. So there was a considerable amount of errata that needed to be updated based on the software. I told my publisher, I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Can't do it. It's just not worth it. I had a baby at home, and if I'm going to spend time away from my newborn, I want the money I want to basically provide for the family. Wasn't going to do it for free. Any other side projects I had, and this was the dawn of Windows Phone, when Windows Phone seemed like it might have some runway ahead of it. I had a number of apps in the store. I had successfully monetized them through ads. I think I sold one for pay one. Not a lot of money. I could probably buy my wife, myself, and 3 of our friends some Starbucks. Right? It was just not a tremendous amount of money, but they wanted all of it, and I was like, I'm doing this stuff at night. And, a lot of this was, this was the ultimate event. So ultimately kind of the debate was, we own everything you do, and we really could take you to court and get your back royalties if we wanted to. And I'm like, all right, well, if it's going to go that way, and this is a lesson, this is really a key lesson I want you to take away. Don't let people push you around. I heard John Lee Dumas say this, or was one of his guests on, years later, I discovered the Entrepreneur on Fire podcast. And basically what you tolerate persists. And that really resonated with me, because if I let them push me around, which apparently I was not the first person to go through this, I was just the first person to like kick and scream. And they kept telling me, well, you're the first published author we have. I'm like, if you keep this up, I'm going to be the only one you'll ever have. And he was a true believer. He really thought he was in the right on this. And we weren't going to come to common ground. They were kind of pulled out the big stick, like, we could sue you, you could lose your job. I just pointed out, if you own everything I do, then you own everything I do or create. So you best not be too mean to me, because I may decide to get into a different industry. Wouldn't it be great if there was, swimsuit model app on the Windows Store, right? Oh, who owns it? You do. What if I decide to get really nasty and do something way more risque? Dare I say unprofessional? You own it. And I'll make sure everyone else owns it, hypothetically. So the moral of the story is, stand up for yourself. When threatened, push back, because I saw the light in his eyes. He realized, like, the realization in his eyes when he realized that, they didn't think this through. They did not think that through, that if they own everything somebody owns, there's a downside to that too. And then step 4, I ultimately started looking for a new job, and I ended up my first stint at Microsoft. Because I went from that one day, I went from finally being happy in this job to finally not looking for another job. because the customer site was so toxic, to finally saying, you know what, I can make a home here. I can do great things here. And then literally like an hour later, it started on a downward spiral. Um, I started looking for another job after this back and forth, and I clearly was not going to win. I basically killed everything I was in, ended everything I was in. I paused ads on the site, kind of preemptively, and I was just like, you know, you can't steal what's not there, and that's basically what I told them. So what's really funny is some people don't learn their lesson. Through the grapevine, I heard that somebody else and had decided to get into indie game making, like basically building his own games just for fun. You sell it on the Xbox store, I don't know, $1, Steam, whatever. Not enough to feed the family, but definitely enough to kind of make the time that you're spending on it worth it, right? Because we all have passion projects. If you don't have passion projects, I think that is a recipe for burnout. So ultimately, like 2 or 3 years after I'd been through this rigmarole, they had pretty much done the same thing to this guy, and he's like, I don't understand this, and he doesn't work there anymore either. So it's very short-sighted. I can understand if I were making something that was competing to their customers or them. I understand that. I wasn't. That having been said, the real lesson I took away was something I learned as a kid in New York City and in Bayonne. If you let people push you around, you're always going to be pushed around. If you push back, even if you don't think you can win, what you tolerate persists, right? So if I tolerated that, who knows where that would have went. And I know, I mean, that's really kind of the thing. And people, in case you're wondering, I generally don't do these kind of live streams on a script. I actually wasn't even going to do a live stream today. I was going to save it for tomorrow. But the fact that these tweets kind of came in, and like I still remember, the feelings I felt. I still remember. And it's like, and what's really interesting is that if you follow her thread, this has happened to more than one person. What's actually really nice is that Adam here is like, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Like, how nice is that? Like, he also, looked through this, and, I mean, that's just ridiculous. I even asked him, like, hey, is that the same people? I wonder. He's also in DC. Adam and I are in a class together with Lillian Pearson as the teacher. But so he's an awesome guy. Maybe I'll have him on the live stream here. But he has some interesting stuff going on here. Data scientist, doing some. He's working on a course and things like that. So I mean, ultimately, what you tolerate persists, and I think that if you're in a situation, could be work, could be something else, and you're not liking it, for lack of a better term, I highly recommend you think about, am I tolerating this, and is it persisting because I've tolerated it? The fear that, I mean, I don't want to call what they did bullying, but it feels an awful lot like bullying. But bullies will try see what they get away with. If they get away with something, they're going to do more of it. And the funny thing is, I left, not that I'm like this most wonderful person in the world. But at the time they had a number of technology influencers working for them. Eventually, about 3-4 years later, they ended up having all the technology influencers had basically run into the same thing, because you have a blog, you got to maintain it, you got to monetize it somehow, or you write a book, and to have someone come at it is almost just an insult. So I don't know. I kind of rambled, but that's just my kind of sage wisdom for the day. I don't see any comments coming in on my console here. But I did notice yesterday that I didn't see the comments come in, but they did come in. So I'm not sure. So if you've asked a question, I haven't answered it. My apologies. I don't see it here in the console. I know it's Sunday. I know there's a lot of football games going on. I myself am looking forward to baseball season and spring because typically these H1, these influenza viruses tend to die down when the weather gets warm, which is probably why things are going so well in Australia and New Zealand. It's not 100% public health policy, although that does play a role in it. That having been said, I am definitely looking forward to spring. And this is a guy who normally loves winter. So now that Christmas is over, I eagerly await the start of baseball season and the like. But the message I want to take away is keep in mind what has persisted in your life up till now has been your willingness to tolerate it. If you want some audiobooks, I highly recommend this one, the first 5 moves. Oh, sorry. 5 moves. Book here. Oh, what the cool graphic. Yeah. So currently listening to Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. Really awesome. I'm actually doing the audiobook. This is awesome. And the first 15, 20 minutes, I was blown away by how awesome it was. I mean, it's like Grant Cardone level awesomeness of book. He reads it. He wrote it. He has an amazing story. I have to follow him. He has an amazing story. He's an amazing storyteller. But that is an awesome book. If you want the audiobook for free, you just go to thedatadrivenbook.com and that will take you to a landing page at Audible where you'll be able to get your first free book. I recommend this one. Can't recommend this one enough. So with that, I will say you have a great day. You have a great Sunday, or if it's Monday where you are. And let's, since tomorrow's the first official work day of the year, let's go rock this thing. Let's go rock those things and be true to yourself and demand respect. Expect respect, right? And don't tolerate anything less than that, what you deserve. Also, don't be a diva either. That's not cool. Diva, Devo. Don't do that either, right? There's a fine line. But with that, I will say you have a great day. And just for fun, I'll throw up some 3D graphics that I make and I'm proud of.